Stop trying harder. Stop forcing systems that were never built for your brain. Stop blaming yourself for a problem that was never about discipline. If you are a woman with late-diagnosed ADHD, listen very carefully. Because what you were told about productivity, focus, and self-control was wrong. You are not broken. You are misaligned. Your brain does not fail because you lack willpower. It fails because you were trained to survive inside systems that punish how you think, how you feel, and how you function. This audiobook is not about fixing you. It is about redesigning your life so your brain finally stops fighting you. In the next 90 minutes, you will learn how to work with your brain, not against it. How to focus without forcing yourself into burnout. How to regulate emotions without shame. How to create order at home and in your mind without collapsing from exhaustion. And here is why you must stay until the very end. Because the final chapter is where everything connects. That is where you build a system that does not rely on motivation, memory, or perfection. That is where ADHD stops being something you manage and becomes something you design around. If you leave early, you will understand yourself better. If you stay until the end, you will live differently. Before we continue, do one important thing. Subscribe to this channel now, not later, not after this chapter. Now, because this is not background noise. This is a framework you will return to every time your life feels overwhelming again. If you have spent years feeling behind, scattered, emotionally exhausted, or quietly ashamed of how hard everything feels, this audiobook was built for you. This is where self-blame ends. This is where self-trust begins. Let's begin. Chapter 1. Stop trying harder. Your brain rejects force. Stop pushing, stop bracing, stop treating your brain like an enemy that must be conquered. Listen carefully. Trying harder is not neutral for an ADHD brain. It is not motivating. It is not strengthening. It is threatening. The harder you push, the more your nervous system resists. The more you force, the more your brain shuts down. That is not a mindset problem. That is biology. You have a choice. You can keep forcing yourself and burning out, or you can learn alignment and finally move forward. That is the key. You were taught that success comes from willpower, from grit. Discipline is applied more harshly and for longer than everyone else. And when that didn't work, you blamed yourself. You told yourself you were lazy, unfocused, inconsistent, too emotional, too scattered. But the truth is simpler and far more uncomfortable. Your brain rejects force. An ADHD brain is not motivated by pressure. It is activated by safety, interest, clarity, and momentum. When you apply force, your nervous system interprets it as danger. Deadlines feel like threats. To-do lists feel like judgment. Just do it feels like an attack. So your system does exactly what it was designed to do. It protects you, it freezes, it avoids, it dissociates, it shuts down. And then you push harder, and the cycle tightens. You have lived this loop for years. You sit down to work. You tell yourself, this should not be hard. Your body tightens. Your thoughts scatter. You feel resistance. You feel shame. You feel behind. So you apply more force, you criticize yourself, you try to power through, and your brain says no. That is the moment most women internalize the lie. I am broken. No. You are misaligned. That is the truth. This chapter exists to burn into your nervous system. Late diagnosed women were not trained to function. They were trained to mask. Masking is not productivity. Masking is survival. You learned how to look organized while drowning internally. You learned how to smile while exhausted. You learned how to over-prepare, overperform, and overcompensate. And sometimes it worked. For a while. You met deadlines at the cost of your health. You held things together at the cost of your peace. You appeared capable while silently collapsing. Masking produces results, but it extracts interest at a brutal rate, short-term success, long-term exhaustion. That is the pattern. So when someone tells you to just try harder, understand what they are asking. They are asking you to mask more intensely. They are asking you to override your nervous system. You do not need their permission to stop. Say that again. You do not need their permission to stop. You do not need to earn rest by suffering first. You do not need to prove your worth by exhausting yourself. You do not need to break yourself to be taken seriously. That is not discipline. That is damage. Here is the core truth of this chapter. Effort without alignment creates burnout. Say it again. Effort without alignment creates burnout. This is where productivity actually begins. Not with more discipline and not with stricter routines, not with more pressure. Productivity begins when force is removed. That is the key. Force creates friction. Friction drains energy. Energy loss leads to avoidance. Avoidance creates shame. Shame creates paralysis. Alignment does the opposite. Alignment reduces friction. Reduced friction preserves energy. Energy creates momentum. Momentum creates consistency. Consistency creates results. This is not motivational language. This is mechanical. Think of your brain like an engine. You have been redlining it for years, holding it at maximum RPM. No recovery, no margin, no forgiveness. Eventually, engines fail. Not because they are weak, because they are abused. Your brain is not broken. It is overheated, and you keep responding with more force. That stops here. You have a choice. You can keep fighting your nervous system, or you can design for it. Design always beats discipline. That is the shift you must make. Stop asking, "Why can't I do this?" Start asking, "What is making this hard?" That single question changes everything. Because when you investigate friction instead of blaming yourself, solutions appear. Let's get concrete. Force-based productivity sounds like this. I should be able to do this. Other people can do this. I just need to push through. I'll rest later. I'll fix it once things calm down. Alignment-based productivity sounds different. What part of this feels unsafe? What part of this is unclear? What part of this requires too much working memory? What can I remove? Remove, not add. Remove friction. Restore function. Say it again. Remove friction. Restore function. This is where most systems fail you. They add more steps, more rules, more expectations. ADHD brains do not need more complexity. They need less resistance. If starting feels impossible, the task is too large. If remembering feels impossible, the system is invisible. If finishing feels impossible, the reward is too far away. This is not laziness. This is a design failure, and you have been blaming yourself for it. That ends now. Here is your first behavioral instruction. And it is non-negotiable. Stop forcing starts. Starting is the highest friction moment for an ADHD brain, so stop demanding full engagement right away. Instead, create an entry ramp. Do not tell yourself to clean the kitchen. Tell yourself to put one dish in the sink. Do not tell yourself to work for an hour. Tell yourself to open the document. Do not tell yourself to organize your life. Tell yourself to choose one surface. This is not lowering standards. This is lowering resistance. And resistance is the real enemy. You have a choice. Force big, starts, and stall. Or design small steps and move. That is the key. Here is the second instruction. Stop using shame as fuel. Shame does not motivate an ADHD brain. It paralyzes it. Every time you say, "What is wrong with me?" your nervous system hears danger. Your executive function shuts down. Your brain goes offline. You cannot shame yourself into clarity. So replace the question. Not "what is wrong with me?" but "what does my brain need right now?" Safety, structure, clarity, permission. You don't need their permission. You need your own. Here's the third instruction. Build for bad days. Most systems fail because they assume consistency you do not have. They work only when you feel good, focused, rested, motivated. That is fantasy. Alignment means designing systems that still function when you are tired, emotional, distracted, or overwhelmed. If your system collapses on a bad day, it is not supportive. It is fragile, and fragile systems require force. Strong systems reduce demand. That is the goal. Let this sink in. Your productivity problems are not a personal failure. They are a signal that you have been forcing where you should have been designing. Say it again. It's not about willpower, it's about alignment. You have a choice. Keep proving yourself through exhaustion, or start respecting how your brain actually works. One path leads to burnout, the other leads to sustainability, and sustainability is the real win. You do not need to become someone else to function. You need to stop fighting who you already are. That is where power returns. You have now learned the first rule of working with your brain. Force creates resistance. Alignment creates momentum. You remove the lie. Now you build the engine. You stop trying harder. Now you learn how to move without motivation. Chapter 2. Motivation is unreliable. Build momentum instead. Stop waiting to feel ready. Stop waiting to feel motivated and stop waiting for the right mood. Motivation is not coming to save you. Listen carefully. Motivation is unreliable for everyone, but for an ADHD brain, it is a trap. You have been taught a dangerous lie, that productive people feel motivated first and act second. That is backwards. Action creates motivation. Momentum creates energy. Movement creates clarity. That is the key. An ADHD brain is not driven by importance. It is driven by interest, novelty, urgency, and reward. So when something matters deeply but feels boring, abstract, or delayed, your brain does not engage. And then you blame yourself. You say, "If this mattered enough, I would do it." No. If this activated your dopamine system, you would do it. You have a choice. Keep waiting for motivation and staying stuck, or build momentum and move forward without it. Most women with late diagnosed ADHD spend years negotiating with motivation. I'll start when I feel like it. I'll do it once I have energy. I'll get to it when my mind is clear. And days pass. Weeks pass. Years pass. Not because you do not care, but because your brain does not respond to intention alone. That is not a character flaw. That is neurology. Motivation is emotional, momentum is mechanical. Emotions fluctuate, mechanics compound. That is the difference. You do not need to feel motivated to begin. You need to begin in a way your brain can tolerate. Say it again. You do not need motivation, you need momentum. Here is what momentum actually is. Momentum is evidence. Evidence that movement is happening. Evidence that progress exists. Evidence that effort leads somewhere. An ADHD brain does not trust promises. It trusts proof. That is why motivation fails you. It is abstract. It is invisible. It lives in the future. Momentum is concrete. It is immediate. It lives in the present. That is the shift you must make. Let's completely break the motivation myth. Motivation is not something you summon, it is something your brain releases after progress. Dopamine is released by anticipation and reward, not by obligation, not by pressure, not by shame. So when you tell yourself, I should do this, ye cheats, your brain hears a threat. When you tell yourself this will take forever, your brain disengages. When you tell yourself, I have to do all of it, your brain freezes. Force again, resistance again. The solution is not more pressure. The solution is a smaller target. That is the key. Momentum begins at a scale your nervous system does not resist. Not an hour, not a finished task, not a perfect outcome. One action, and it must be so small it feels almost pointless. Because pointless is safe, and safe allows movement. You have a choice. Aim big and stall, or aim small and start. Starting is everything. Here is the rule you must internalize. If a task feels heavy, you are thinking too big. If a task feels impossible, you are demanding too much at once. Break it down again, then break it down again, then break it down one more time, until your brain says, I can do that. That moment is where momentum begins. Let's get practical. You want to work. You feel overwhelmed. Your brain resists. Do not ask, how do I finish this? Ask, what is the smallest visible action I can take in the next 2 minutes? Open the document. Write the title. Read one paragraph. Set a timer for 3 minutes. That is it. You stop there if you want. But something interesting happens. Once movement begins, resistance drops. Once resistance drops, focus improves. Once focus improves, time stretches. That is not discipline. That is dopamine responding to progress. Momentum pulled you in, you did not force it. You allowed it. That is the pattern you must repeat. Say it again. Small action, visible progress, momentum. This is why all or nothing thinking is so destructive for ADHD brains. If you believe it only counts if you finish, you will avoid starting. If you believe partial effort is failure, you will do nothing. Perfection kills momentum. Completion is not the goal. Continuation is. You have a choice. Chase perfect days or build consistent motion. Consistent motion wins. Here is another hard truth. Waiting for motivation is a form of avoidance. Not because you are lazy, but because your brain is protecting you from overwhelm. Motivation becomes the excuse that feels responsible. I just need to get in the right headspace. But headspace comes after movement, not before. You don't need clarity to act, you need action to create clarity. That is the order. Let's talk about energy. You think you lack energy, but most of your energy is trapped behind resistance. Every time you think about a task instead of touching it, you leak energy. Every time you feel guilty for not doing something, you drain energy. Every time you replay what you should have done, you exhaust yourself. Thinking is expensive. Doing is cheaper. That sounds backwards, but it is true for your brain. Action simplifies. Rumination complicates. So the rule becomes this: when stuck, stop thinking. Touch the task. Not finish. Not solve. Touch. You have a choice. Think your way into movement, or move your way into clarity. Movement wins. Here is your second behavioral instruction for this chapter. Create artificial momentum. Do not wait for urgency. Create it. Use timers. Use body doubling. Use external structure. Your brain responds to immediacy. Set a timer for 5 minutes and tell yourself you can stop when it ends. Most of the time, you won't. Sit near someone else working. Your brain mirrors action. It wakes up. Change location. Novelty sparks dopamine. New environments reduce resistance. This is not cheating. This is a strategy. You do not need their permission to design your life this way. Say it again. You do not need their permission. Here is the third instruction. Stop measuring success by output alone. Measure it by engagement. Did you touch the task today? Did you move it forward by one step? Did you maintain connection instead of avoidance? That counts, because momentum is fragile, and shame destroys it instantly. If you punish yourself for little progress, your brain learns not to try. Reward movement, acknowledge effort, track consistency, not completion. That is how trust is rebuilt. Let this sink in. Motivation comes and goes. Momentum compounds. Motivation is emotional. Momentum is structural. Motivation asks, do I feel like it? Momentum asks, what is the next smallest step? One question leads to paralysis. The other leads to progress. You have a choice. Live at the mercy of your moods, or build systems that move you forward anyway. That is empowerment. You do not need to feel inspired to live effectively. You need to move in ways your brain can sustain. That is what working with your brain actually means. You stopped forcing effort in Chapter 1. Now you stopped waiting for motivation. You replaced pressure with movement. You replaced guilt with momentum. And now something important happens. As momentum builds, another truth reveals itself. Your focus problems are not a productivity issue, they are a regulatory issue. You mastered movement. Now you must understand what runs underneath. Chapter 3. Your nervous system runs your to-do list. You think you have a focus problem. You think you have a productivity problem. You think you have a discipline problem. You don't. You have a regulation problem. Listen carefully. Your nervous system decides what you can do before your mind ever gets a vote. That is the key. When your nervous system feels unsafe, overwhelmed, rushed, or judged, your executive function shuts down. Planning disappears, prioritizing collapses, starting feels impossible. Not because you are incapable, because your body is protecting you. You have a choice. Keep blaming your focus, or learn to regulate the system that controls it. Most late-diagnosed women were taught to override their nervous system. Ignore exhaustion, push through anxiety, smile through overwhelm, and sometimes that worked. Until it didn't, because the nervous system always collects its debt. When you live in chronic activation, your brain stays in survival mode. Survival mode is fast, reactive, emotion-driven. Survival mode is not thoughtful. It is not strategic. It is not productive. You cannot plan for survival. You cannot focus on a threat. You cannot execute from overwhelm. That is not a weakness. That is physiology. Say it again. You cannot execute from overwhelm. That is why on some days you can do everything, and other days you cannot do anything. It is not an inconsistency. It is a state. Your capacity changes with your nervous system state. Calm equals capacity. Activation equals avoidance. Shutdown equals paralysis. That is the pattern you must understand. You have a choice. Fight the pattern or work with it. Here is the truth no one told you. Productivity begins in the body, not the mind. If your body feels unsafe, your brain will not cooperate. No planner can fix that. No app can override that. No amount of willpower can sustainably push through it. So we stop trying to fix focus, and we start regulating first. That is the shift. Let's name the 3 states that matter. State 1, regulated. You feel grounded, present, capable. In this state, tasks feel manageable. Time feels real. Decisions feel possible. State 2, activated. You feel rushed, anxious, on edge. In this state, you overthink. You start and stop. You scroll. You avoid. State 3, shut down. You feel numb, exhausted, disconnected. In this state, even simple tasks feel heavy. You want to disappear. You freeze. Most women with ADHD bounce between activated and shut down, rarely regulated, and then they judge themselves for it. That stops here. You don't need to be calmer. You need to be safer. Say it again. You don't need motivation. You need safety. Safety signals your nervous system to let go of control. It can allow focus. It can allow engagement. Without safety, your brain stays on guard. Now let's talk about what destroys regulation. Pressure, urgency, shame, noise, clutter. Too many demands, too many decisions. Sound familiar? Your life is not chaotic because you are disorganized. It is chaotic because your nervous system never gets a break. So here is the core discipline of this chapter. Regulate first, execute second. That is the order. If you reverse it, you will keep failing. Let's get practical. Here is the first instruction. Before you start any task, check your state, not your mood, your body. Ask yourself, am I calm, activated, or shut down? Name it. Naming creates distance. Distance creates choice. If you are regulated, proceed. If you are activated or shut down, you do not force action. You regulate first. That is not avoidance, that is a strategy. Here is the second instruction. Learn fast regulation tools, not meditation marathons, not hour-long routines, fast, accessible, repeatable, because you need regulation in real life. Start with the breath. When you slow your exhale, you signal to your nervous system that there is no immediate threat. Inhale through your nose for 4 seconds. Exhale through your mouth for 6. Do that 5 times. That is it. You don't need to feel calm, you need to lower the activation enough to function. That is the goal. Here is another tool. Change posture. Stand up, drop your shoulders, put your feet on the ground. Your body posture feeds information to your brain. Collapsed posture signals defeat. Open posture signals safety. It sounds small. It is not. Here is another. Reduce sensory input. If your environment is loud, bright, cluttered, or chaotic, your nervous system stays in a state of constant activation. Turn off notifications. Lower the lights. Clear one surface. You do not need a perfect environment. You need a quieter one. Remove friction. Restore function. Say it again. Remove friction. Restore function. Here is the third instruction. Stop starting tasks when you are dysregulated. This is critical. If you start while activated, your brain associates the task with stress. If you start while shut down, your brain associates the task with exhaustion. Then next time, resistance doubles. So pause. Regulate, then touch the task. Not finish. Touch. This is how you retrain your brain to see tasks as safe. You have a choice. Keep pairing work with stress, or rewire your system to tolerate engagement. That is the work. Now let's address emotional regulation. ADHD emotions are intense, fast, overwhelming. Not because you are dramatic, because your nervous system processes stimuli deeply. The problem is not feeling. The problem is reacting while dysregulated. When emotions spike, executive function drops. So the rule becomes this: feel first, name it, then decide. Do not decide while flooded. Say it again. Feel it. Name it. Do not let it drive. This is not emotional suppression. This is emotional leadership. You don't need to get rid of emotions. You need to stop letting them run the schedule. Here is the fourth instruction. Create regulation rituals before productivity rituals. Not morning routines designed for perfection. Small anchors, a cup of tea before work, 3 deep breaths before opening your laptop, a short walk before starting a task. Your nervous system learns through repetition. Safety before action. Calm before the effort. This is how consistency is built. Let this sink in. Most productivity advice fails you because it assumes a regulated nervous system. You don't have one by default, and you must build it intentionally. That is not a flaw, that is your responsibility. And here is the empowering truth. Once your nervous system is regulated, your focus improves automatically. Your memory improves. Your tolerance improves. Your capacity expands. You don't need to chase focus. Focus follows regulation. That is the key. You have a choice. Keep forcing yourself to work through dysregulation. Or respect the system that determines whether work is possible at all. One path leads to burnout. The other leads to sustainability. You are not behind. You are overwhelmed. And overwhelm is not solved by effort. It is solved by safety. You mastered effort in Chapter 1. You mastered momentum in Chapter 2. Now you understand the regulation. But there is another trap waiting for you. Even when regulated, many systems still fail. Not because of emotion, but because they are built for a fantasy version of you. You regulated the engine, now you must redesign the structure. Chapter 4. Stop organizing for fantasy you. Build for reality you. Stop designing your life for someone you are not. Stop organizing for a version of you that only exists on perfect days. Stop building systems that collapse the moment you get tired. Fantasy. You is not coming. Listen carefully. Most organizational systems fail for one reason. They were built for an imaginary person. A person who wakes up rested, remembers everything, finishes what they start, keeps things tidy naturally and never gets overwhelmed. That person is not real. And yet almost every planner, routine, and productivity system assumes she exists. You have a choice. Keep trying to become fantasy you, or build systems for reality you and finally function. That is the key. Reality, you get distracted. Reality, you forget. Reality, you have uneven energy. Reality, you have emotional spikes and crashes. Reality, you have bad days. And none of that makes you irresponsible. It makes you human with an ADHD nervous system. The problem was never that you failed the system. The system failed you. Say it again. The system failed you. Fantasy-based systems rely on memory, on consistency, on internal motivation, on remembering later. Reality-based systems rely on visibility, on simplicity, on redundancy, on external support. This is where everything shifts. If you keep organizing for fantasy you will keep needing force. If you organize for reality you, force disappears. Remove friction, restore function. Say it again. Remove friction. Restore function. Let's expose the fantasy you're thinking. Fantasy you says, I'll remember where I put that. Reality you won't. Fantasy you says, I'll put this away later. Reality you forget it exists. Fantasy you says, I'll check the planner. Reality you don't. Fantasy you says, why? I'll clean everything at once. Reality you burn out halfway. And every time reality you fails. Fantasy you system, shame follows. You have a choice. Blame yourself again, or redesign the system. That is the work of this chapter. Here is the rule you must internalize. If a system relies on memory, it will fail. If a system relies on motivation, it will fail. If a system relies on consistency, it will fail. Not because you are flawed, but because ADHD brains do not operate on internal recall. They operate on external cues, so we stop hiding things. We stop over-organizing. We stop building invisible systems. Visibility beats perfection, always. That is the key. Here is your first instruction. Make everything you need to remember visible. Not neat, visible. Open shelves beat closed cabinets. Clear bins beat opaque boxes. Labels beat aesthetics. If you cannot see it, your brain treats it as non-existent. That is not irresponsibility. That is neurology. Stop shaming yourself for it. Your environment is not just a place you live. It is your external memory, so build it accordingly. Here is the second instruction. Create homes, not rules. Fantasy systems create rules. Always put this here. Never leave this out. Everything must be sorted. Reality-based systems create homes. One obvious place. One low-effort destination. If something requires multiple steps to put away, it will not be put away. If it requires bending, opening, sorting, or thinking, it will pile up. That is the truth. You have a choice. Demand discipline or design ease. Ease wins. Put the laundry basket where clothes come off. Put the trash where trash appears. Put the keys where you drop them. Not where they should go. Where do they actually go? You don't need their permission to organize this way. Say it again. You don't need their permission. Here is the third instruction. Organize for low energy. Most systems only work when you feel good, focused, motivated, calm. That is fantasy you again. Reality. You organize when tired, when overstimulated, when distracted. So ask this question. Can I maintain this system on my worst day? If the answer is no, simplify. Fewer categories, fewer steps, fewer decisions. Decision fatigue kills maintenance. One bin beats 5. One hook beats a drawer. One open surface beats hidden storage. This is not messy. This is functional, and function is the goal. Say it again. Function beats form. Here is the fourth instruction. Stop expecting yourself to reset everything. ADHD brains struggle with full resets. They excel at partial order. So stop aiming for perfection. Aim for containment. Instead of clean the room, aim for clear the floor. Instead of organize the kitchen, aim for empty the sink. Contain chaos. Do not eliminate it. Because chaos always returns. The goal is not a pristine life. The goal is a manageable one. That is alignment. You have a choice. Chase an unrealistic order, or build a sustainable order. Sustainable wins. Let's talk about maintenance. Most people fail not at organizing, but at maintaining. Why? Because maintenance requires remembering, and remembering is unreliable for your brain. So stop relying on it. Build reset points into your environment. A basket where everything goes when you don't know where it belongs. A catch-all drawer that prevents piles. A weekly reset time with a timer, not a checklist. Structure replaces memory. That is the principle. Now let's address the emotional layer. You were taught that clutter is a moral failure. That mess means laziness. That disorganization means not trying. Those beliefs are not neutral. They create shame. And shame destroys follow-through. You cannot shame yourself into organization. So we replace judgment with curiosity. Not, why am I like this? But what made this hard? Every pile tells a story. Too many steps, too much decision-making, too little visibility. The pile is data. Say it again. The pile is data. Use it. If something keeps ending up in the same place, that place is trying to be its home. Honor that. You are not here to control yourself. You are here to support yourself. That is the reframe. Here is another hard truth. Minimalism is not required. Simplicity is. You do not need fewer things. You need fewer obstacles. If you love something, keep it. Just make it easy to store and access. Joy matters for your brain, and this is not about discipline, it is about alignment. Now let's lock this in with repetition. You have a choice. Organize for fantasy or design for reality. One path creates shame. The other creates stability. You do not need to become more consistent. You need systems that tolerate inconsistency. That is the difference. You stopped forcing effort. You stopped waiting for motivation. You learned to regulate your nervous system. Now you redesign the environment to support you. And once your systems match your brain, something changes. Time stops slipping through your fingers. Not because you control it better, but because you can finally see it. You mastered structure. Now you must master time. Chapter 5. Time. Blindness is not a flaw, it is a constraint. Stop telling yourself you are bad with time. Stop calling yourself irresponsible. Stop assuming you should just know how long things take. You don't have a time management problem, you have a perception problem. But that is the key. An ADHD brain does not experience time the way other brains do. It experiences now and not now. That's it. There is no intuitive sense of later, no built-in countdown, no internal clock you can trust. So when people say, just plan better, what they are really saying is, use a tool you don't have. You have a choice. Keep blaming yourself for a missing tool, or build external ones that actually work. Time blindness is not a character flaw. It is a neurological constraint. Say it again. It is a constraint. Constraints require design. Not shame, not force, not lectures. Design. Here is what time blindness looks like in real life. You underestimate how long things take. You overestimate how much you can do. You lose track of time once you start. You forget future commitments until they are urgent. And then you rush. You panic. You apologize. You feel behind. Again. You have lived this cycle, and every time you conclude the same thing. I need to try harder. No, trying harder does not fix perception. This chapter exists to give you a new rule. If you cannot feel time, you must see it. That is the rule. Say it again. If you cannot feel time, you must see it. Internal time fails you. External time saves you. Let's break the myth. Most productivity advice assumes time awareness. It assumes you can estimate, predict, sequence. You can't, not reliably, so stop expecting yourself to. That expectation is where the suffering begins. You have a choice. Keep trusting an unreliable sense, or outsource time to tools that don't forget. Outsourcing is not a weakness, it is intelligence. You outsource math to calculators, navigation to GPS, memory to calendars. Time is no different. Here is the first instruction of this chapter. Stop estimating time in your head. Your brain lies, not on purpose, by design. It assumes best-case scenarios. It ignores transition costs. It forgets fatigue. So stop asking, how long will this take? And start asking, what does the clock say? Use timers for everything, work, breaks, transitions, not to control you, to inform you. A timer turns time into something concrete, visible, external. That is the key. Set a timer when you start. Set a timer to stop when you need to. Set a timer before you must leave. Do not rely on internal signals. You don't need their permission to live this way. Say it again. You don't need their permission. Here is the second instruction. Make time visual. Calendars alone are not enough. They hide time inside boxes. You need cues your brain can feel. Analog clocks, countdown timers, progress bars. Seeing time pass anchors you in reality. Without visual time, everything feels infinite or immediate. Both are dangerous. Infinite tasks get avoided. Immediate deadlines cause panic. Visual time creates boundaries, and boundaries create safety. Safety creates focus. That is the chain. Here is the third instruction. Build buffers everywhere. Time blindness ignores transitions. Getting ready, switching tasks, recovering energy. So you must add buffers on purpose. If something takes 30 minutes, block 45. If you can do 3 tasks, plan for 2. Not because you are slow, because you are human. Buffers are not laziness. They are realistic, and realism reduces stress. Say it again. Realism reduces stress. Stress destroys time awareness even more. This is how people get trapped. They underestimate time. They rush. They get stressed. Stress worsens time blindness. The cycle tightens. Buffers break the cycle. Here is the fourth instruction. Anchor time to events, not clocks. ADHD brains track events better than numbers. Instead of work at 2, think work after lunch. Instead of leave at 8:30, think leave after coffee. Tie time to something tangible. This makes planning intuitive. You don't need perfect scheduling. You need cues that make sense to your brain. That is alignment. Now let's talk about urgency. Urgency is the only time awareness many ADHD brains have. Deadlines activate. Consequences focus. But living only on urgency is exhausting. Your body stays activated, your nervous system stays stressed. Burnout follows. So we do not eliminate urgency, we distribute it. Create gentle urgency earlier, short timers, micro deadlines, external accountability, not pressure. Structure. Structure replaces panic. That is the goal. Here is the fifth instruction. Break the future into visible checkpoints. The future feels fake to your brain, so stop planning in weeks and months, plan in days, hours. Next actions. If something is not on today's list, it may as well not exist. That is not irresponsibility. That is how your brain works. So respect it. You have a choice. Plan abstractly and forget, or plan concretely and act. Concrete wins. Now let's address the emotional cost of time blindness. You have been shamed for being late, for forgetting, for rushing. That shame does not teach time awareness. It teaches fear. Fear makes time blindness worse. So we remove the moral layer. Being late is not a moral failure, it is feedback for the system, not for your worth. Say it again, feedback, not failure. When something goes wrong, ask one question. What support was missing? More reminders, earlier alarms, clearer cues, bigger buffers. Design fixes patterns, shame repeats them. That is the difference. Let this land. You are not bad with time. Time is invisible to your brain, so you make it visible. You are not careless. You are under-supported, so you build support. You are not failing adulthood. You are navigating a different operating system, and that system requires external tools. That is not negotiable. You mastered effort in Chapter 1. You mastered momentum in Chapter 2. You regulated your nervous system in Chapter 3. You redesigned your environment in Chapter 4. Now you learned the truth about time. Time blindness is a constraint. Constraints require systems, and when systems match constraints, shame disappears. But there is still one silent drain stealing your capacity every single day. Not time, not energy, decisions. You see it now. You see how much choice costs you. You mastered time. Now you must master decision fatigue. Chapter 6. Decision fatigue is draining your life. Reduce choices ruthlessly. You think you are tired because you do too much. You are not. You are tired because you make too many decisions. Listen carefully. Every decision costs energy. Every choice drains capacity. Every tiny, "What should I do next?" taxes your nervous system. That is the key. An ADHD brain burns decision energy faster than most, not because it is weak, but because it processes more variables, more possibilities, more input at once. So when your day is filled with constant choosing, your system collapses. You have a choice. Keep exhausting yourself with decisions, or reduce them and reclaim your energy. Decision fatigue is not dramatic, it is mechanical. And it is silently draining your life. You wake up and decide what to wear, what to eat, what to start, what to answer first, what to ignore, what matters most. By noon, your brain is fried, and then you blame yourself for being unproductive. No, you are decision depleted. That is different. Say it again, you are decision depleted. Most productivity systems assume unlimited decision capacity. You do not have that. So you stop building lives that require constant choosing. You build defaults. Defaults are power. That is the shift in this chapter. You do not need more willpower. You need fewer decisions. Say it again, fewer decisions. More execution. This is how high-performing people protect their energy. Not by being smarter, but by deciding once and repeating. Look closely at your resistance patterns. You do not avoid work because you hate effort. You avoid work because it requires too many micro decisions. Where to start, how to start, what order, what matters most. Decision overload feels like overwhelm. Overwhelm triggers shutdown, so you scroll, you freeze, you escape. Not because you don't care, because your brain is done deciding. You have a choice. Keep paying this hidden tax, or remove it at the source. That is the key. Here is the first discipline of this chapter. Decide in advance, not in the moment, not when you are tired, not when you are emotional. Decide when your brain is calm. Decide what mornings look like. Decide what work starts with. Decide what happens when you feel stuck. Pre-decisions remove pressure. They turn chaos into sequence. Instead of asking, "What should I do now?" you follow a script. Scripts free energy. Say it again. Scripts free energy. Here is a simple example. Instead of deciding each morning how to start work, choose one rule. When I sit down, I open the same document every time. No thinking, no debate, no negotiation. The decision is already made. You don't need motivation, you need fewer options. Here is the second discipline. Limit daily priorities aggressively. Fantasy productivity says do more. Reality-based productivity says do less, consistently. Your brain cannot hold 10 priorities. It barely holds 3, so choose 3. Not 5, not 7. 3 non-negotiables. If it is not one of the 3, it is optional. This is not underachieving. This is a protective capacity. Say it again. Protect capacity. When everything matters, nothing moves. Here is the third discipline. Create default meals, clothes, and routines. Not forever. just enough to reduce daily decisions. Eat the same breakfast, wear similar outfits. Schedule work blocks the same way. Predictability calms your nervous system. It preserves cognitive energy for what actually matters. You do not need novelty everywhere. Save novelty for creativity, not logistics. That is alignment. You don't need their permission to live simply. Say it again. You don't need their permission. Here is the fourth discipline. Remove low-value choices completely. Look at your day. How many decisions add nothing to your life? What app to open? What email to answer first? What task to start? These decisions feel small, but they accumulate. So, eliminate them. Open the same app first. Process messages in one block. Start with the same task category daily. This is not rigid, this is protective. Rigid systems break under pressure. Simple systems survive. That is the difference. Now let's talk about the emotional layer. Decision fatigue feels like failure. I should know what to do. I'm wasting time. I can't even decide. That shame makes everything worse. Shame drains more energy than decisions ever could. So remove the moral judgment. Difficulty deciding is not a flaw, it is feedback. Feedback that your system is overloaded. So you simplify the system. Don't attack yourself. Say it again. Fix the system, not the self. Here is the fifth discipline. Create if-then rules. These are pre-decisions for moments of overwhelm. If I feel stuck, then I do the smallest visible task. If I feel overwhelmed, then I stop and regulate. If I don't know what to do, then I return to my list of 3. No thinking required. The decision is already made. This is how you protect yourself from a spiral. This is leadership over your own mind. Now let's talk about why this matters so deeply. Decision fatigue does not just reduce productivity. It also impairs decision-making. It reduces self-trust. Every time you hesitate, doubt grows. Every time you stall, confidence erodes. You start believing you cannot rely on yourself. That belief is devastating. Reducing decisions restores trust. When action becomes automatic, self-trust returns. You don't need to believe in yourself. You need systems that move you forward even when belief is low. That is the truth. You have a choice. Keep negotiating with yourself all day, or remove negotiation entirely. Negotiation is exhausting. Execution is simpler. Now listen closely. Most people think freedom means unlimited choice. It does not. Unlimited choice creates paralysis. Freedom is reduced friction. Freedom is knowing what to do without debate. Freedom is having fewer decisions steal your energy. That is the kind of freedom your brain needs. Let this sink in. You are not scattered because you lack focus. You are scattered because you are constantly deciding. So you stop. You decide once. You repeat. You decide what matters. You eliminate the rest. That is discipline, not force, not punishment. Design. Say it one last time. It's not about willpower, it's about reducing decisions. You have now removed another silent drain. You stopped forcing effort. You stopped waiting for motivation. You regulated your nervous system. You redesigned your environment. You made time visible. You reduced decisions. And now something changes. Your mind gets quieter. Your energy stabilizes. Your actions become more consistent. But consistency alone is not enough. Because even with systems, something still hijacks you. Emotion. You mastered structure. Now you must master emotional overload. Chapter 7. Emotional overload is a signal, not a failure. Stop telling yourself you are too emotional. Stop apologizing for feeling deeply. Stop assuming that intensity is the problem, and it's not. Emotional overload is not a weakness. It is a signal. That is the key. An ADHD brain does not feel a little. It feels fast. It feels loud. It feels all at once. And when emotions spike, executive function drops. That is not drama. That is neurology. You have a choice. Treat emotions like enemies to be suppressed, or treat them like data you can use. Data creates strategy. Suppression creates explosions. You already know how suppression ends. You hold it together. You push through. You stay functional until you don't. Then the crash comes. Tears, anger, numbness, shutdown, and afterward, shame. That cycle ends here. Say it again. Emotions are signals. They are not commands. They are not instructions. They are information. You don't need to obey them. You need to read them. That is emotional discipline. Most late-diagnosed women were taught one of two things. Either emotions were inconvenient or emotions were dangerous. So you learned to manage other people's comfort instead of your own comfort. You smiled when overwhelmed. You stayed polite when flooded. You stayed quiet when hurt. That did not make you mature. It made you disconnected from your internal signals. And when you ignore signals long enough, they get louder. That is an overload. Overload is not sudden. It is cumulative. Small stresses stack. Unprocessed emotions pile up. Sensory input compounds. Until your system says, enough. You have a choice. Keep treating overload as failure, or start using it as feedback. Feedback leads to change. Failure leads to shame. Say it again. Feedback, not failure. Let's break down what emotional overload actually is. Overload happens when demand exceeds capacity. Too much noise, too many expectations, too many decisions, too much pressure. Your nervous system goes into protection mode. Fight, flight, freeze, anger, anxiety, shut down. The emotion is not the problem. The overload is. So we stop asking, why am I so emotional? And start asking, what pushed me past capacity? That question restores control. Here is the first discipline of this chapter. Name the state before reacting. When emotion spikes, pause. Not to suppress, to label. I am overwhelmed. I am overstimulated. I am disappointed. I am exhausted. Naming activates the thinking brain. It creates space between feeling and action. That space is power. You have a choice. React automatically or respond intentionally. That is the key. Here is the second discipline. Delay decisions when emotional. Strong emotions distort judgment. They shrink perspective. They exaggerate consequences. So, you make a rule. No major decisions while flooded. Not quitting, not confronting, not committing. You regulate first. Say it again. Regulate first. Decide second. This is not avoidance. This is leadership. Here is the third discipline. Discharge emotion physically. ADHD emotions live in the body. They need movement, not analysis. Talking helps later. Movement helps now. Walk, stretch, shake, breathe. Do something that tells your body it is safe to release. If you try to think your way out of emotional overload, you will fail. Movement resets faster than logic. That is the truth. Here is the fourth discipline. Reduce emotional load proactively. Most overload is preventable, not by controlling life, by managing input. Limit noise. Limit commitments. Limit exposure to draining people and content. You do not owe everyone access to your nervous system. Say it again. You don't need their permission. Protecting your energy is not selfish. It is functional. Here is the fifth discipline. Build emotional buffers into your day, just like time buffers, just like decision buffers, transitions between tasks, quiet moments between interactions, recovery after stress. If you schedule your day back-to-back, overload is inevitable. Leave space. Space allows regulation. Regulation allows capacity. That is alignment. Now let's address the shame layer. You were taught that emotional control means emotional absence. That is wrong. Control means awareness and choice. Feeling intensely does not make you unstable. Acting without awareness does. You are not failing because you feel. You fail when you ignore the signal and push anyway. That is where damage happens. Say it again. Intensity is not the enemy. Disconnection is. Here is another truth. Emotional overload often looks like procrastination. You avoid tasks not because you are lazy, but because they are emotionally loaded. Fear of failure, fear of judgment, fear of disappointment. Your brain protects you by avoiding pain, so instead of forcing yourself to act, you acknowledge the emotion first. What am I afraid of here? What feels heavy? Name it. Once named, intensity drops. That is the pattern. Now let's talk about emotional boundaries. ADHD brains absorb emotion easily. Other people's stress becomes yours. So you must learn to separate. Their urgency is not your emergency. Their disappointment is not your failure. Their mood is not your responsibility. You have a choice. Carry everything or choose what is yours. Choosing is discipline. Say it again. Choosing is discipline. Here is a simple rule. If something does not require immediate action, it does not deserve immediate emotional energy. Urgency is often artificial. Pause, assess, then respond. This protects you from constant activation. Now let's integrate this. Emotional overload is a signal that something is off. Too much input, too much pressure, too little recovery. So you adjust. You don't push harder. You don't shame yourself. You redesign. Remove friction. Restore function. Say it again. Remove friction. Restore function. You have a choice. Keep treating emotions like a liability, or start using them as guidance. Guidance leads to sustainable living. You stopped forcing effort. You stopped waiting for motivation. You regulated your nervous system. You redesigned your environment. You made time visible. You reduced decisions. Now you learned how to work with emotion instead of fighting it. But there is still one place where everything breaks down. Not in planning, not in feeling, in finishing. You start things, you build systems, you make progress. And then, completion slips away. You mastered starting. Now you must learn to finish without burning out. Chapter 8. Finishing is hard. Designed for closure, not perfection. You are not bad at finishing. You are exhausted by perfection. Listen carefully. Starting is not your biggest problem. Maintaining is not your biggest problem. Finishing is. That is the key. ADHD brains are wired for initiation. Novelty sparks dopamine. Beginnings feel alive. Endings do not. Endings are quiet. They are tedious. They require sustained attention with diminishing reward. So your brain loses interest. Not because you are lazy, because the dopamine drops. And then you blame yourself again. You have a choice. Keep chasing perfect completion, or design for closure and move forward. Perfection delays closure. Closure restores momentum. Say it again. Closure restores momentum. Half-finished projects surround most women with ADHD. Courses started but not completed. Rooms are almost organized. Plans mostly executed. Each unfinished thing carries weight. Mental weight, emotional weight, open loops drain energy. And the longer they stay open, the heavier they feel. So we stop aiming for perfect finishes. We aim to be done enough. That is the shift. Perfection is not excellence. It is avoidance disguised as standards. Perfection says, not yet. Closure says, this version is complete. You have a choice. Keep polishing forever or release and recover energy. Energy matters more than polish. Here is the first discipline of this chapter. Redefine what done means. Fantasy. You finish everything flawlessly. Reality. You need functional completion. So define done in advance. Not perfect, not ideal, specific. For example, done means the room is usable. Done means the document has a clear draft. Done means the task no longer blocks progress. This removes ambiguity. Ambiguity kills completion. Say it again. Ambiguity kills completion. Here is the second discipline. Build artificial endings. ADHD brains struggle with natural stopping points, so you create them. Timers, deadlines, checklists, not as pressure, as a structure. When the timer ends, I stop. When the list is complete, I close the task. Closure needs a signal. Without a signal, tasks linger indefinitely. Here is the third discipline. Separate completion from evaluation. Most people try to finish and judge at the same time. That doubles the cognitive load, so you split them. First, complete. Later, review. Never simultaneously. Judgment mid-task kills momentum. Say it again. Complete first, evaluate later. Here is the fourth discipline. Lower the emotional cost of finishing. Finishing triggers fear. Fear of judgment. Fear of disappointment. Fear of, is this good enough? So you reduce the stakes. Share drafts with safe people. Submit imperfect versions. Practice releasing without overthinking. Your nervous system must learn that finishing is safe. Safety allows repetition. Repetition builds consistency. Here is the fifth discipline. Close loops daily. Not everything, something. Finish one small thing every day. One email, one surface, one decision. Closure builds trust. Trust builds confidence. Confidence fuels momentum. That is the loop you want. Now let's talk about the emotional trap. Many women with ADHD believe unfinished means failed. That belief is poison. Unfinished means paused. Paused means incomplete. Incompletion is not failure. Failure only happens when you stop returning. So remove the drama. You are not behind. You are mid-process. Say it again. Mid-process. That language matters. Here is another truth. You avoid finishing because finishing ends the possibility. As long as something is unfinished, it can still be perfect. Once finished, it becomes real. Reality invites judgment, so you delay. That is human, not weak, but if you never finish, nothing compounds. Progress requires release. You have a choice. Hold on to the possibility, or trade it for progress. Progress wins. Here is a simple rule. Finished beats perfectly, always. Say it again. Finished beats perfectly. Now let's integrate this with earlier chapters. Force kills finishing. Motivation fades before endings. Dysregulation increases near deadlines. Decision fatigue spikes at the end. Emotions intensify with evaluation. So finishing must be designed deliberately. You do not stumble into completion. You build pathways to it. That is discipline, not punishment, not pressure. Design. You are learning to work with your brain, not against it. You have a choice. Keep judging unfinished work, or start closing loops intentionally. One path keeps you stuck, the other moves your life forward. Now here is the deeper layer. Finishing restores identity. Every time you finish something, your brain records evidence. I complete things. I follow through. I can trust myself. That belief changes behavior. Self-trust is not built through affirmations. It is built through closure. Small closures matter. Let this land. You are not a quitter. You are someone whose systems never supported endings. Now they will. You mastered effort. You mastered momentum. You regulated your nervous system. You redesigned your environment. You made time visible. You reduced decisions. You worked with emotion. You learned how to finish. And now you reach the most sensitive domain of all. Home. Not productivity. Not work. Home. Where emotional weight, identity, and organization collide, you mastered completion. Now you must design your home to support your brain, not judge it. Chapter 9. Your home is a nervous system, not a moral test. Stop treating your home like evidence. Stop reading your worth in the state of your space. Stop confusing mess with failure. Your home is not a report card. It is a nervous system. That is the key. Your environment absorbs stress. It reflects overload. It broadcasts safety or threat to your brain. And when your home feels hostile, your nervous system never rests. You have a choice. Keep moralizing mess, or design your space to regulate you. Most women with late-diagnosed ADHD grew up learning that a clean home meant being good, responsible, capable, and a messy home meant the opposite: lazy, careless, not trying. Those beliefs did damage because they turned daily life into a test you could never pass. Say it again: never pass. So you avoided inviting people over. You apologized for your space. You cleaned in bursts of panic and shame. That was no tan organization. That was survival. And survival is exhausting. Here is the truth this chapter exists to anchor. Your home should calm your nervous system. Don't judge it. That is the goal. A regulated home supports regulation. A chaotic home amplifies stress. This is not about aesthetics. It is about capacity. You do not need a perfect home. You need a functional one. Say it again: functional, not perfect. Let's break the myth. Mess is not a moral failure. It is a signal of friction. Too many steps, too many decisions, too little containment. Your home is talking to you, and so you listen. You have a choice. Blame yourself for the signal, or respond with design. Design always wins. Here is the first discipline of this chapter. Stop organizing for guests. Organize for daily use. Fantasy homes are staged. Reality homes are lived in. If your system only works when no one touches it, it is not a system. It is a display. So ask the right question. Not, does this look good? But does this make my life easier? That question changes everything. Here is the second discipline. Design for drop zones. Your brain drops things: keys, bags, mail, clothes. So you stop fighting gravity. You create drop zones where drops already happen. A bowl for keys, a hook for bags, a basket for mail, a chair for clothes that are worn but not dirty. Not ideal. Effective. If something keeps landing in the same place, that place wants to be a system. Honor it. You don't need their permission to live this way. Say it again. You don't need their permission. Here is the third discipline. Contain chaos instead of erasing it. Chaos exists. Always. So you give it boundaries, baskets, bins, drawers. Containment lowers visual noise. Lower noise calms the nervous system. A contained mess is manageable. An open mess is overwhelming. This is not avoidance, this is a regulation. Say it again. Containment is a regulation. Here is the fourth discipline. Reduce visual clutter aggressively. Your brain processes everything it sees. Every pile, every surface, every object. Too much input equals constant activation. So you clear surfaces, not entire rooms. Surfaces. One table, one counter, one desk. Clear space equals mental space. That is not symbolic. It is neurological. Here is the fifth discipline. Create zones with single purposes. When spaces have multiple jobs, your brain gets confused. The bed is for sleeping, the desk is for work, the couch is for rest. Blurring zones blurs signals. Clear zones help your brain shift states. State shifts matter, they reduce friction, they improve transitions. Now let's talk about cleaning. Cleaning is not maintenance for ADHD brains. It is recovery. You clean after an overload, after the collapse, after panic. So we stop pretending that cleaning should be constant. Instead, we design reset rhythms. Short, timed, contained. 10 minutes, one room, one goal. Not clean everything. Restore function. Say it again. Restore function. Here is a powerful reframe. Your home is allowed to look lived in. Lived in does not mean out of control. It means active. Life leaves traces. The goal is not to erase life. It is to support it. Now let's address the shame layer directly. You are taught that home management is a measure of character, especially for women. That belief is outdated and harmful. Your value does not rise and fall with laundry. Say it clearly. Your value does not rise and fall with laundry. You are not failing adulthood because your space reflects your nervous system. Your space reflects reality. So we work with it. Here is another discipline. Lower the bar for the daily reset. If the reset requires hours, it will not happen. So lower it. 5 minutes, one song, one basket. Resetting is not cleaning. It is restoring usability. Usability matters. Now let's integrate everything. Your home affects your nervous system. Your nervous system affects your capacity. Your capacity affects your follow-through. This is not about tidiness. This is about sustainability. You have a choice. Live in constant low-level stress, or design your space to support you. Support creates calm. Calm creates clarity. That is the chain. Here is the hardest truth of this chapter. You cannot hate yourself into an organized home. Hate creates avoidance. Avoidance creates accumulation. Accumulation creates shame. The cycle repeats. So you break it with compassion, with design, with realism. You don't need motivation to maintain a home. You need systems that tolerate inconsistency. Say it again, tolerate inconsistency, because inconsistency is not going away, and that is okay. Now let's lock this in. Your home is a nervous system. Treat it gently. Support it intentionally. You stopped forcing effort. You stopped waiting for motivation. You regulated your nervous system. You redesigned your environment. You made time visible. You reduced decisions. You worked with emotion. You designed for finishing. Now you aligned your home. And there is one final piece. Not tools, not systems, not space. Identity. Who you believe you are determines how you act. You fix the structure. Now you must rewrite the story. Chapter 10. Stop fixing yourself. Start trusting yourself. Stop treating yourself like a project. Stop hunting for the final fix. Stop assuming there is something fundamentally wrong with you. There isn't. The problem was never you. The problem was distrust. That is the key. For years, you were taught not to trust your instincts, not to trust your energy, do not trust your emotions, not to trust your pace. So, you outsourced authority to planners, to rules, to other people's expectations. And every time a system failed, you concluded the same thing. I need to fix myself. No, you need to stop betraying yourself. You have a choice. Keep searching for the next solution, or start trusting the evidence you already have. Evidence matters. Let's review the evidence. You learned why force doesn't work. You learned how momentum replaces motivation. You learned that regulation controls focus. You learned to design environments that support you. You learned to make time visible. You learned to reduce decisions. You learned to work with emotion. You learned to design for finishing. You learned to treat your home as a nervous system. Those are not hacks. They are proof. Proof that when systems match your brain, you function. So what exactly are you still trying to fix? The urge to fix yourself comes from one belief: I can't be trusted. That belief is not neutral. It drives every overcorrection, every rigid rule, every extreme reset. You swing between control and collapse because you don't trust yourself to self-regulate. That ends here. Trust is not blind faith. Trust is built through evidence, and you now have evidence. You have a choice. Keep collecting tools without integration, or commit to trusting the systems you built. That is the difference between searching and living. Here is the first discipline of this chapter. Stop abandoning yourself when things get messy. When you miss a day, when you fall behind, when energy drops. That is the moment you usually panic. Scrap everything. Start over. Add rules. That reaction destroys trust. Instead, you pause. You ask one question: what support is missing? Not, what is wrong with me? What support is missing? Support builds trust. Punishment destroys it. Say it again. Support builds trust. Here is the second discipline. Honor your patterns rather than fight them. You already know how your energy moves, when focus peaks, when crashes come. What drains you? Stop pretending otherwise. Planning against your patterns is self-betrayal. Planning with them is self-leadership. Leadership means accepting reality and designing accordingly. That is the key. You don't need their permission to plan around your needs. Say it again. You don't need their permission. Here is the third discipline. Replace self-surveillance with self-observation. Stop watching yourself for mistakes. Stop waiting to catch yourself failing. Observe without judgment. What worked today? What didn't? What helped? What drained me? Curiosity builds insight. Judgment builds fear. Fear kills consistency. Say it again. Curiosity over judgment. Here is the fourth discipline. Commit to consistency over intensity. You were taught to make dramatic changes. Clean everything, fix everything, optimize everything. Intensity looks productive and it feels powerful, but it doesn't last. Consistency feels boring, quiet, unimpressive, but it compounds. Trust is built through repetition, not through breakthroughs. One small promise kept every day matters more than one perfect week. That is discipline, and not force, not control, alignment. Here is the fifth discipline. Let go of the fantasy finish line. There is no moment when everything becomes easy. No point where ADHD disappears. No day when systems stop being needed. That expectation keeps you dissatisfied. You are not trying to arrive somewhere. You are learning how to live sustainably. Sustainability beats perfection. Say it again. Sustainability beats perfection. Now let's talk about identity. For years, your identity was built around struggle. I'm bad at this. I can't be trusted. I always mess things up. That identity shaped your behavior, but identity is not truth. It is a story repeated, so you choose a new one. Not aspirational, accurate. I respond well to the right systems. I function when supported. I can trust myself when I design intentionally. That identity is grounded in evidence. Evidence matters. Now here is the hardest truth. Trusting yourself means tolerating imperfection without panic. It means allowing off days without spiraling, allowing mess without shame, allowing rest without justification. That is emotional maturity. Control is not maturity. Trust is. You have a choice. Clamp down when things wobble, or stay steady and adjust gently. Gentle adjustments last. Now listen closely. Most people never reach this stage. They stay stuck, fixing, optimizing, restarting. You are stepping into something different. Self-trust. Self-trust does not mean doing whatever you feel like. It means listening to signals and responding appropriately. It means honoring capacity, respecting limits, using structure without resentment. That is adulthood on your terms. And it is powerful. Let's lock this in with repetition. You have a choice. Fix endlessly, or trust deliberately. Fixing keeps you dependent. Trust makes you autonomous. You do not need another system. You need commitment to the ones that work. You do not need to become someone else. You need to stop fighting who you already are. That is freedom. Now let's bring this book home. You stopped forcing effort. You stopped waiting for motivation. You learned to regulate your nervous system. You redesigned your environment. You made time visible. You reduced decisions. You worked with emotion. You designed for finishing. You aligned your home. And now you reclaim trust. This is not a transformation that happens overnight. It is a framework you return to every time life gets loud, every time systems wobble, every time you doubt yourself again. You return to alignment. That is the real work. You don't need their permission to live this way. You don't need to justify your needs. You don't need to earn support through suffering. You have a choice. Right now, stop fixing yourself. Start trusting yourself, and then act accordingly. Stop trying harder. Stop forcing systems that were never built for your brain. Stop blaming yourself for a problem that was never about discipline. If you have listened to this audiobook from beginning to end, you now know something most people never learn. You were never broken. You were misaligned. You learned why force creates resistance, why motivation cannot be trusted, why momentum matters more than mood. You learned that your nervous system runs your focus, that regulation always comes before execution, that safety creates capacity. You learned how to redesign your environment so it supports you rather than shames you. How to stop organizing for a fantasy version of yourself. How to build systems that tolerate bad days, low energy, and inconsistency. You learned that time blindness is not a flaw. It is a constraint, and constraints require external structure, not self-criticism. You learned how decision fatigue quietly drains your life, how reducing choices restores energy, how simplicity protects your brain. You learned that emotional overload is a signal, not a failure. Those feelings are data, not commands. That intensity does not disqualify you. You learned how to finish without perfection, how to close loops without burning yourself out, how to release rather than endlessly refine. You learned that your home is not a moral test. It is a nervous system, and it deserves design, not judgment. And finally, you learned the most important lesson of all. You do not need fixing. You need trust. Trust built through evidence, through alignment, through systems that work with you, not against you. This audiobook was never about doing more. It was about stopping the quiet self-betrayal that comes from forcing yourself into shapes you were never meant to fit. You now have a framework, not a checklist, not a routine that collapses under pressure, a framework you can return to. Every time life feels overwhelming, every time motivation disappears, every time shame tries to take control again, you have a choice, always. And now, if this audiobook resonated with you, there is one more step that will deepen everything you have learned here. If you want to strengthen self-trust even further, if you want to quiet mental loops, overthinking, and self-doubt, if you want to stop your thoughts from running your life, then the most natural next listen for you is this: critical thinking mastery. Control your thoughts before they control you. Once your life is aligned with your brain, the next level is learning to guide your thinking without force, without suppression, and without constant self-correction. That audiobook builds directly on what you learned here. Not productivity hacks, not motivation tricks, but mental clarity, emotional distance, and calm authority over your own inner world. If this audiobook helped you trust yourself again, that one will help you trust your thoughts. Finally, before you go, if this audiobook gave you language for experiences you never had words for, if it made you feel seen, understood, or relieved, if it helped you stop blaming yourself even a little, subscribe to this channel, not because you owe us anything, but because this is the kind of framework you return to when life gets loud again. This is not background noise. This is alignment. This is where self-blame ends. This is where self-trust becomes your default. And now you know. You don't need to try harder. You need to live smarter. On your terms.